Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today we're back at it with another spoiler video for Magic the Gathering, but this one might come as a bit of a surprise. This is for the Final Fantasy expansion. Now today is the start of Tarkir Dragonstorm spoiler season. We have a ton of crazy spoilers coming later today, and you can expect a video coming from me shortly for that, but there were a couple Final Fantasy cards that were spoiled over the last few days or so that I haven't had a chance to cover in official capacity in long form on the channel, so I want to take this opportunity to just cover those cards really quickly before we dive headlong into the Tarkir Dragonstorm spoilers, but those are on the way, so stick around. Also, if you haven't already, please like the video. It helps the channel grow by getting the video out to so many more people, brings in more traffic for me, and I would appreciate it so much. Just hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. Crazy content on the way, and catch me live Monday through Friday over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/QuarantineCapricorn, because I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. Now let's talk about these cards. The first of which is the oldest one. This is Celes Rune Knight. I believe this was leaked, or spoiled rather, at some point last week. This is one of the commander cards for the Final Fantasy expansion, so it will not be standard legal, and it will probably be in the same commander deck as Terra. We've already seen Terra spoiled, and we know that there is an entire commander deck that is centered around Final Fantasy VI, so it would make a whole lot of sense that this just comes in that commander deck. In fact, I think I can just go ahead and confirm that, because it wouldn't make sense for this to appear anywhere else at all. But Celes Rune Knight is a 4/4 legendary human wizard knight for 4 mana in the colors of Mardu. When she enters, you discard any number of cards and then draw that many cards +1. And whenever one or more other creatures you control enter, if one or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I kind of love this, and it has me thinking in a bunch of different directions. So first of all, being able to wheel your whole hand, discard your whole hand, draw that many +1 can be pretty nuts, especially with a lot of the Aether Drift mechanics we recently saw, where we get value off of discarding things, stuff like Monument to Endurance, and a lot of the Is It stuff that gets value when you discard. There's a lot of payoffs for discard now, and I think we can actually push that up to 11, push that way over the line, and do some crazy stuff with Celes and some of those payoffs, which seems really interesting. But we're also filling up the graveyard with things that we can bring back, like in a Reanimator deck, which I think is the entire point because of the second ability. You know, whenever one or more other creatures enter, if one or more of them entered from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature. Every time you bring one creature back from your graveyard, every creature gets a counter. So this is going to be good in counter decks, where you want to build up counters because of value you're getting. Maybe you draw cards when you put counters on your creatures and stuff like that. But the main card, or the main type of card that I tend to think of when I look at this, is stuff like Helping Hand. All of those different like 1 or 2 mana white spells that can bring a cheap, 3 cost or less creature back from the graveyard for 1 or 2 mana very efficiently. Being able to just dump your hand of weenies and then systematically bring them back one by one while growing your entire board of weenies, and probably also still playing weenies from your hand during that process so that they can get the +1/+1 counters as well. I said weenie entirely too many times in this video already, so I'm gonna stop. But back in the day, we always called white weenie decks, the white decks that went wide with a bunch of small creatures. We always called them white weenies, so pardon me, okay? But I do think this card is really cool, and I think the flavor is really awesome. A human wizard knight. Really cool. But we're going to move on to the newest and most interesting card, I think. This is Zell Dincht. And this is going to be in the base Final Fantasy set, so this is not a commander-only card. Zell is a 0/3 legendary human monk for 1 red and 2. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and Zell Dincht gets +1/+0 for each land you control, but also at the beginning of your end step, you return a land you control to its owner's hand. This card is just busto. First of all, let's talk about the fact that it comes down for 3 on turn 3, even if you're playing it fair. If you're not playing Llanowar Elves and ramping it out early or whatever, let's say it comes down on turn 3. You immediately get to play another land, which means it's a 4/3 on turn 3. And even though it has a downside of returning a land you control to its owner's hand, the upside of that is you get to re-trigger landfall abilities, as many as you want, constantly. You never run out of gas to re-trigger a landfall ability. You always have at least one land in your hand to play to trigger those landfall abilities. And if you draw into a land, since you can play 2 lands a turn, you can play the thing that you put back in your hand and play the thing you drew, so it doesn't actually slow you down from curving out either. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. Normally, bouncing a land to your hand could have its upsides, but has a very detrimental downside of potentially slowing you down and stopping you from curving out the way that you want to. But the fact that the way you play out 2 lands a turn is tacked onto the exact same card that bounces the land to your hand means you're never going to be in a situation where you can't play 2 lands a turn after bouncing a land. Except for one very specific situation. If the turn you play this, you don't have another land to play. So you play it on turn 3, you don't have a 4th land in your hand to drop, it's just a 3/3, you say go. Your opponent lets you bounce your land to your hand and then kills Zell before you get a chance to take your next turn. Then it could be very bad. If you top deck a land and you have 2 lands in your hand, now you're back a whole mana, right? And you can't play them both out to catch up like you could if Zell was still on the field. But that situation is not going to happen very often. As long as you can at least play that 4th land right after you play the Zell, even if they kill it after you bounce your land, you're not any further back than you would have been if you just didn't play the Zell at all. So I think it kind of has a lot of like protections and checks and balances built into the card itself, which is really cool. Just being able to play 2 lands on each of your turns tacked onto the same card that's going to be bouncing the land, it just means you're always going to be in a situation where you can kind of protect yourself from getting blown out. Like I said, except for when those rare situations occur. But also just the fact that in a ramp deck, this can be a huge powered threat and sometimes can just win the game by swinging in. I feel like this is an insane amount of value. And I also want to point out that we did see chocobos for this set already, and it was confirmed that landfall is a common theme among the chocobos, and we already saw one mana chocobo that has a landfall ability. So I think landfall is coming back in a big way, and if you look at a card like this, and you think about landfall coming back in a big way, that is really scary for standard. I mean, this is probably going to be playable in older formats as well if you're in a deck that's super landfall intensive. But standard is going to see landfall come back in a big way, I think, which is pretty exciting. And not only that, but you can pair this and put it alongside cards like the new Lumbering World Wagon, which also ramps you and adds an aggressive threat to the field that grows its power. It's very similar to this card, and I think works really well in conjunction with it. So I just think Zell is sweet. I really, really like Final Fantasy VIII, even though mechanically it's one of my least favorite Final Fantasies, and I think the junction system and the draw and stock system is really, really flawed. And even the story is kind of slow with a lot of exposition, but I played that game at a time in my life when a lot of crazy changes were happening for me, and I have a lot of fond memories just because of nostalgia, I guess. So even though mechanically I'm not the biggest fan of Final Fantasy VIII, it does hold a very special place in my heart just because of my history with the game and, you know, how old I was when I played it. I was just graduating. I was about to graduate high school, and crazy times. So it's cool seeing Final Fantasy VIII represented. It's cool seeing my boy Zell here as a Final Fantasy card. Very, very exciting stuff. But that's going to do it for today. Thanks so much for checking these out. Again, I do have another video coming later with all the crazy new Tarkir Dragonstorm spoilers that are coming today, so please look forward to that. But until next time, like, subscribe, do the thing, and I'll see you then. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.